this kid even know where we were? How did he even get in here? And how dangerous is this kid really? So back in 2018, I had just turned 21 years old, and most people at that age in that part of their life, they're really excited to hit the clubs and bars. But me and my friends were much different than that. We were never really into the party scene. At least not into it since we were 16 years old drinking in the woods or at a house party. It doesn't really matter, we just weren't into those kinds of things at 21. We were into training, combat sports, and outdoor adventures. All we did was eat healthy, train, work out, watch the UFC, go on trips together. So when I turned 21, I set a plan to go see a big UFC event that year. I wasn't sure exactly what event I wanted to go to at first, so I waited patiently for the right event to get announced. And then it finally was. I know that these names are not going to mean anything to most of you, but please bear with me because they're going to have significance to the story. Khabib Nurmagomedov was set to fight Tony Ferguson April 7th, 2018 at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. This fight was the one. Not just because it was an unbelievable fight between two incredible athletes that were on some of the greatest win streaks that the sport had ever seen, but because my favorite cousin lived in Brooklyn at the time. It was just perfect. I would get to go to an amazing event and see my favorite cousin all in the same weekend. There's nothing better than visiting a new city and you have one of your favorite people in the world that already lived there ready to be the best tour guide ever. So I booked it right away. But I didn't just book it for me, I had to bring my boy Ebro. He loves him some Khabib Nurmagomedov. So obviously he was on board right away. The plan was to fly into Brooklyn on Thursday and then fly out Sunday. The reason for this is because the press conference to the fights is usually on Thursday. The official weigh-ins are on Friday, then they have the fight on Saturday. And we wanted to be there for all of the events because it would make the build up to the fight just that much better. So we booked the tickets 2 months out and then we just sit and wait. We obviously bought the worst seats in economy that could have ever existed, and we got the last row at the Barclays Center, the cheapest ones that we could get. Because let's be real, we were piss broke at the time, but still it felt like it was going to be an amazing weekend. And as the weeks passed and the time is winding down towards the event, the anticipation really starts to grow for us. There was so much hype around this fight, and everybody that I told that I was going was oozing with jealousy, just because of how much buildup there was to this event. And this backstory is going to be important, so please follow me here, even if you are not an MMA fan. I promise it's important. To give you a brief context, Khabib and Tony were supposed to fight 4 times previously, and they took turns getting hurt and pulling out of each fight prior. Everybody in the fight world knew that these two guys were the best 2 guys in the world, but nobody could seem to get these 2 guys in that cage together. It had been going on for years at this point. Like, they kept trying to make this fight and they just kept getting hurt, but it really felt like it was going to happen this time. And finally, it was fight week, April 1st, 2018. Our flight was scheduled for April 4th, but the fighters had already arrived in Brooklyn and were doing interviews on April 1st. Then a news story starts making rounds on Instagram that seems like it has to be a joke. Tony Ferguson trips over wires backstage at Media Day and tears MCL, ACL, and meniscus. UFC 223 main event is off. This was a headline that was so ridiculous that it must be an April Fool's joke, because it was April 1st, and this fight had been labeled a cursed fight up until this point because of how many times it was supposed to happen and it didn't happen. I swear to you, I did not take it seriously when I saw it, until I checked the UFC's official Instagram page, and the fight was officially off. Tony Ferguson had blown his knees to bits, tripping on a wire backstage. And of course, I was absolutely devastated. Honestly, devastated is an understatement. I was deflated. I had been so pumped up for this trip, and this news knocked the wind out of me. Because it's not like there's anybody in this world that will fight Khabib Nurmagomedov on 6 days' notice. The scary Russian wrestler from Dagestan that only knows the English phrases, "I am mountain guy," and "I smash your boy." No one in the world is stepping up to save this event. We're getting to a freaky, spooky story, by the way. All of this matters, just sit tight. And me and Ebro are obviously upset all day, because this was going to dramatically change the tone of the trip. When you're going to an event and the carpet gets yanked out from everyone last minute, the event just doesn't feel the same. All of the other people that are traveling to go see this fight are going to come in with the same air of disappointment that we are. So we just spent the whole day sulking around because we were sure that Khabib isn't going to be fighting either. This card's ruined. And then something magical happened. The craziest dude on the roster raised his hand and said, "I'll do it." The BMF champ himself, Max Blessed Holloway, took a fight with Khabib Mountain Guy I Smash Your Boy Nurmagomedov on 6 days notice. If you don't know who Max Holloway is, he's a crazy Hawaiian dude that would fight heavyweights if they let him. Max Holloway fights at 145 pounds, and Khabib fights at 155 pounds, a 10-pound difference, but Max said, let's do it. But I swear to you, Max would fight a 260-pound man if somebody told Max that 260-pound man was better than him. He'd say, if you want to be the best, you gotta beat the best. And the best is blessed. And then he would fight a polar bear if that's who was in front of him. This man simply does not care. So moral of the story, me and Ebro are absolutely pumped again to go on this trip. Max saved this card and we cannot wait to go. And I was even more excited about this because Max had been my favorite fighter for years at this point. And I never imagined that he would fight Khabib. So it was like a treat. Out of left field, but amazing. So this is where the real story starts. So now that you understand the setting and the energy and the drama around this event, Thursday morning comes around and it's time for us to catch our flight. Me and Ebro wake up early in the morning and we catch the blue line to O'Hare Airport a couple hours early. There were barely any lines, so we had about 2 hours to kill inside the terminal. But let me tell you, that vacation euphoria had hit us. You know that feeling that you get when you get to the airport and nothing else in life matters? Nothing but the sweet trip that you have ahead of you. Nobody could call you, text you, bother you, nothing. You're on airplane mode and it is just pure bliss. Especially when you're two 21-year-olds with 2 backpacks and a couple $100s to blow. So it's safe to say if you bumped into me and Ebro at that time, our immaculate vibes were probably going to rub off on you a little bit. Because when we're in a good mood and we're working off each other, it's laughs all around for everybody. We're both performers at heart, so when we really get it started, we can make the crankiest person give us a deep belly laugh. So we're just trotting around this airport, just talking and chatting to strangers for well over an hour. You could usually catch other people who also have vacation energy and build fun travel friends that way. So we go out of our way to go chat with strangers and test the waters a little bit and see where they're going. And we're just waiting in the McDonald's line, just waiting to grab ourselves some coffee. If you don't know, McDonald's has underrated coffee. I'd put it above Starbucks every day. And there was a couple that clearly had vacation vibes right in front of us. They were being silly and cracking jokes, and me and Ebro wanted a piece of that energy. So we just butt in and we matched their energy. So we're just shooting the shit for about 5 minutes while we're waiting to get our coffee, because both parties clearly had time to kill. And we got into a conversation about New York because that's where me and Ebro were headed. I barely remember what the joke was about, but the punchline was something along the lines of, Manhattan is basically Chicago if everybody is allergic to trash cans. You know, because there's so much trash on the street in some parts of Manhattan. Sorry guys. It doesn't really matter, we didn't really mean it. We all got a good laugh out of it at the time, but as our laughter started to fade and one of us was about to start talking again, an odd offbeat laugh came from behind me and to my right. The laugh was too close for it to not be laughing about what we were talking about, but it was a delayed laugh, so it really took me off guard. And I see everybody's eyes start looking a little bit off to my right, so I looked that way as well. And I'm a little thrown off by what I'm looking at. I can't really tell if it's an adult or a teenager. I'm looking at a guy that is pale with some freckles and has kind of got like hair like a Napoleon Dynamite, and he's a little bit pudgy. And he's definitely laughing at the joke that was just told, because his full attention is at the group. But I had no idea that this guy was listening, let alone standing behind me. So I'm looking this kid up and down. I'm trying to gauge what's up with him. There's something a little bit off about it to me, but it's not like he's imposing by any means. He might be 5'7" tops, and he's a little bit pudgy and not an athletic type. He's a non-threat. He looks pretty harmless, but he's just a bit weird. I could tell that we're all a little bit turned off by that random laugh, but none of us really know what to say. But then he continues to giggle and mumble to himself. And he's just like, allergic to trash cans, like to himself. And he just kind of is like working himself up and giggling even more about the allergic to trash cans bit. So he was definitely listening to us and he found amusement from our joke. And once he did that, Ebro spoke up, and to include him a little bit, he just said, and Ebro just goes, oh, you like that bit about the allergic to trash cans? Wait till you hear my bit about Timberland boots and Yankee fitteds. And he seemed to get that reference too, because he started cracking up even more. If you don't get that reference about the Yankee fitteds and the Timberland boots, that's good. It means you're not chronically online like my entire generation. We speak in internet riddles laced with meme references, and that's what that is. To sum it up, it's another corny New York joke. And as he started cracking up again, my guard started to drop a little bit. He initially alarmed me because of his odd behavior and the fact that I didn't know he was right behind me listening. But as he was laughing the second time, I couldn't help but think that this kid might be on the spectrum a little bit. I couldn't be 100% sure, but this kid definitely had low social IQ. And his off-time laugh and the way he butted into the conversation unnaturally was just kind of giving me those context clues that he might have had a sprinkle of autism or something close by to that. So I felt bad right away for judging him right off the bat and feeling defensive, so I just invited him into the conversation right away. I'm not trying to be mean to this kid. So I took a quick shuffle to my left and I made room for him in our coffee circle. And he seemed to be having a good time just listening to us and laughing and listening to us crack jokes for a couple minutes. But eventually the couple that we had been chopping it up with had to head to their gate for their flight. So we just gave airport goodbyes to everybody and we started walking towards our gate. We didn't think anything of that interaction. We had been chopping it up with people all day, but we had no idea how much of an impact a positive interaction like that could have on somebody. We were being nice to everybody that day. We're usually nice to everybody in general, but it holds more weight to certain people more than others. But we weren't even thinking about it anymore. And almost 10 minutes had passed and we had just been walking slowly and then we made it to our gate. Right as we were walking up, our flight started boarding. So naturally we go and try to find a seat on the other end to get out of everybody's way because we're gonna be literally the last people to board. Because like I said, we were piss broke and we got the cheapest tickets that we could possibly get. We were in boarding group 6. We were going to be the last ones on these planes. And I knew for sure it's going to take at least 15 minutes until we could even begin boarding. So me and Ebro just have a quick back and forth and we're just like, yeah, let's get out of everybody's way. Let's go over there. But as I start walking in that direction, I feel somebody grab the back of my arm and my elbow. And then they say, where are you guys going? We have to board. I'm confused as to why somebody thinks that they could grab my arm like that. So I whip my head around and I see this kid that was in the coffee circle being all awkward, looking at me with almost puppy eyes. Where are you guys going? We have to board. And again, I feel bad because he thinks that he's helping us. So I just say to him, oh dude, don't worry about us. We board last because we're broke. But then he looks at me really funny and he goes, no, I'm not getting on without my friends. Hold on. I'm super confused. So I look at Ebro. I'm like, bro, what is this kid talking about? There's no way he's about to make a scene about us having to board later than him just because he has a higher boarding number than us. And I start to feel super bad because I don't know how I'm about to handle this interaction. Because if the woman at the front desk wants to hear my input, it's a hard thing to explain. Because all I could say is, I just met this kid, I think he might be on the spectrum. I'm completely okay with boarding later. I'm sorry he came up and complained, I don't know. So me and Ebro are just watching this kid march up to the desk lady and start talking to her. And he's just in range, just enough for me to faintly hear what he's saying. He's talking about first class something, and then I hear him say my name and Ebro's name. And this was a little bit odd because I know that we introduced ourselves to the couple at McDonald's, but I guess he overheard that too because I had never formally introduced myself. Not to mention, more like I forgot to mention, I didn't even realize that he was following us after that interaction. I had no idea that he was behind me until he grabbed the back of my arm moments earlier. So we're just standing there not sure what the next couple minutes are gonna look like. When finally this kid turns around and just waves us over to the desk and I'm like, oh my god, here we go. I was not looking forward to this because I did not want to embarrass him or offend him or belittle him in any way. But I didn't know a nice way to explain to the desk lady about what was happening. So me and Ebro very tentatively walk up to try to cool down, try to throw water on whatever situation that he just created. But the desk lady just asked to see both of our tickets. And obviously we already have these tickets in hand because we're getting ready to board. So we just fork them over to her. And she scans our tickets and then just simply says, you've been upgraded to first class. You may board the aircraft. And I'm like, what just happened? What is she talking about? Did this lady just charge our accounts for upgrades to first class because this kid told her to? My mind goes right to the worst case scenario. This slightly special kid that's been following us around told this lady that we wanted to be upgraded. And she just emptied me and Ebro's bank account, upgrading us on one flight, leaving us with zero money to spend this entire weekend. So I go, hey, did you already charge us for that? We do not have the money for first class. Can you please change that? And the desk lady just responds with a smile and goes, your friend here paid for your upgrade. So we both turn our attention back towards this kid and we're like, dude, you did not have to do that. And we're immediately asking if they could refund him. This situation is making me and Ebro red in the face with awkwardness. I know Ebro was feeling the exact same way I was. We felt embarrassed that it must have looked like we were taking advantage of this special needs kid and like manipulating him to pay for first class tickets for us. It just wasn't a good look and I hated the idea of him dropping $1,000+ on us. Like I still didn't know this kid's name and he just dropped $1,000 on us. And we're telling him to refund it, but he's just looking at us laughing and snorting and then he replies, no, you guys are the best, I want to fly with you. Come on, let's go. And he walks right past us, marches up to the door, onto the ramp and into the plane. And me and Ebro had a quick moment together. And we're just looking at each other like, what do we do? And mind you, we were 21 years old and we were very, very immature. So it took about 3 seconds of silence until we broke out laughing. And we just dapped each other up and we rolled with it. At the time, it just felt like one of those moments where there was nothing really you could do but enjoy yourselves. So screw it, first class, here we come. It's not like they downgraded us and put us into the cargo section of the plane. Let's just make the best of it, and let's make this flight as fun as we possibly can for him. And by the time we got down the ramp and into the plane, this kid was already in his seat. He was sitting in the window seat on the first row of the plane to our right. And in this first class area, there's only 2 seats on either side of the plane, instead of the regular like 3 or 4 in economy. So either me or Ebro had to sit next to this kid, and the other one had to sit on the opposite side. It's not like we were super far away from each other, but not sitting next to your friend on a flight is always a letdown. So even though it was cool and nice and flattering that he upgraded us to first class, one of us now had to spend our entire flight with him instead of spending our flight together. But it was what it was. So I just asked Ebro, how are we doing this? And I could tell that he could tell that I was not excited about the idea of having to entertain this kid for the entire flight. But then Ebro just put his head down and went, don't worry, I got this. I got a cheat code. And at the same time, he was pulling something out of his bag. And this guy just whipped out his Nintendo Switch and just showed it to me like it was his secret weapon. And he just goes, I'm gonna whoop him in Mario Kart for 2 hours and it's gonna be the time of his life. And we give a little bit of a laugh, but we try to hide it. It was actually a great idea. A small gaming device that they could both play, but it doesn't require them to talk too much. Plus, it'll make the time fly, it'll make it much more bearable, and we'll be off the plane in no time. And what we're actually looking forward to, which is our super fun weekend in Brooklyn and all these fights, will actually start. And let me tell you, first class is dramatically better than economy. And even though I wasn't able to fully enjoy the flight with my friend, it was so comfortable and so spacious. And it really was a treat. I just locked into a movie in my headphones and I was chilling. I could hear the kid laughing over the sounds of my movie, just making like audible laughs and grunts and just excitement in general. And when I'd glance over, I'd just see him and Ebro were just racing against each other in Mario Kart, and this kid just couldn't contain his excitement. I would focus on the movie for quite a bit, but every once in a while I would just want to check on them and I'd just glance over to see how they're doing. I'd do this slick, like I'd mute my earphone and just like so I could hear what they're doing. And this sounds so messed up, but I was really starting to not like this kid. He was giving me super weird vibes because multiple times when I'd glance over, I'd see Ebro just being normal, sitting, looking at the screen playing. But this kid would be pretending to look at the screen by the direction he was pointing his face. But he'd be looking out the corner of his eyes, just staring at Ebro's face. But not just taking a glance, like he'd be taking long gazes at him. He was almost gawking at him. That's the only way I could explain it. It was just gawking. Like a young kid who's seeing a beautiful woman for the first time, and he physically can't stop himself from looking at her. That's kind of what it was like. It just felt off to me. And in between games, I would hear them chatting a little bit. And Ebro was just being so nice to him, just asking him questions about himself. And this kid's answers were weird. I know I said that he might have been a little bit on the spectrum, but I was starting to doubt it at this point. He was starting to sound more low social IQ and kind of manic, and less special needs. And everything that he was saying seemed to have a weird tone to it. When Ebro asked him why he was even in Chicago, he just bluntly said, because I felt like going, followed by a series of slightly too personal questions about Ebro. Like they were just like too personal. And obviously Ebro has a high social IQ, so he was easily able to deflect these intrusive questions and just keep the focus on this kid instead. And Ebro went on to ask him why he upgraded our seats, and this kid said something so weird. Doug said you guys were poor and I'm rich. Well, my parents are rich. So since I wanted to be with you guys, I just upgraded you. It's really easy. It was super weird to me. For one, he said, I wanted to be with you guys. And two, because he referred to the act of upgrading us as easy. Every sentence that came out of this kid's mouth just sounded out of touch with reality. Like, why were you in Chicago? Because I felt like going. Like, why did you upgrade us? Because Doug said you were poor and I'm rich. It was easy. It's very weird to refer to the act of spending money to get something done easy. Because of course, the action of asking them to upgrade the tickets by swiping a card and then they just get the funds, yes, that's easy. Earning the money to afford it is the hard part. It was almost as if he had no concept of what it took to earn money. Like he had no clue what it took to accumulate $1,000 for the average person. He just thought it was really easy to upgrade because he knew that he had the money. But more precisely, his parents had the money. And I'm not saying this from a jealous poor kid perspective. I've always been grateful for the hand I was dealt. And I don't blame rich people for being born rich. I don't think they should be ashamed of it. The same way I don't feel like I should be ashamed for being born in America, which is a huge advantage in the grand scheme of things. I'm just saying it from a social perspective. It just seemed like his relationship with money made no sense. And eventually throughout the flight, I had to stop listening to my movie because I needed to hear more of this kid's train of thought. And obviously, Ebro is a bit intrigued about how this kid thinks as well, because he just kept letting the conversation go the entire flight. This kid had no filter whatsoever, and he just kept talking and talking and talking. Also, I found out his name was Alistair for starters. Super rich guy name. And I also found out that Alistair had a hard time making friends in school. So his parents pulled him out of his private school, and he finished his schooling inside of his estate. He was able to finish school early, and he began coding on his free time. And he had only been focusing on that since he was 16. He said that he takes coding jobs for fun because his parents don't let him use the family credit card unless he has a job, or is at least in school. So he just bought a laptop that he could travel with, and he would just travel around and code from the laptop when he was going from place to place. You see what I'm saying, how bizarre that is? And he said that his family wasn't regular wealthy. He said that they were the type of extreme wealthy that regular people don't even know about, because those type of people apparently are not flashy. And at one point he said, "My one rule is that I have to be working on something." He said, "If I follow that rule, I literally have unlimited funds." And then he said, "I mean it. I literally couldn't spend enough for anybody to notice if I tried." But he wasn't bragging about the money. He was just trying to get through to Ebro, try to really make him understand just how much money his family had. There was an odd honesty about it. He was just trying his best to explain his existence. There are just some people in this world that are born into unlimited funds. And I had always wondered what that would feel like, or what that does to a person. And I was sitting here looking at it. It did this. It made somebody so out of touch with reality that they stood on the outskirts of a group conversation at a random airport, then sneakily followed those people to their gate, upgraded their tickets to buy their attention, and then talk about the bizarre existence that is extreme wealth to complete strangers that you're labeling as friends. And part of me just thought that he thought we were funny, and he just wanted to pay for our entertainment. So he was willing to upgrade us to treat us to some seats as if we were jesters. And bribing us with first class tickets was easy because we're just poor common folks. And he just kept going on and on, just talking Ebro's ear off. So I finally had to tune him out. So I just turned my headphones back on, and I just tried to doze off for the rest of the flight. And I wake up to Ebro nudging me awake. I wasn't fully asleep or anything, so the second he touched me, I was fully coherent. I was just like, "What's up?" And Ebro's looking at me dead serious, and he goes, "That kid's a freak, and we need to ditch him the second we get out of here." I already knew he was weird, but I guess something happened while I was sleeping that pissed Ebro off. Ebro doesn't act like that unless he's actually serious and mad. Alistair had went to the bathroom for a minute. That's why Ebro had time to relay the message to me. And then Alistair came back just a couple seconds after, and he seemed to be in the same talkative mood that he was in before. And Ebro just kind of went back to entertaining him and being really nice. So I knew to just go along with it. I have no idea what he could have done to get Ebro to be so serious, but I sure was curious to find out. I saw him gawking at him, but there's no way that this kid would make advances like that on Ebro. Who even knows? I just knew that we were getting off soon, and we were finally going to get away from this kid. So we just patiently wait, and we put up with this kid for 20 more minutes. And then finally the plane lands. And we were actually the first ones off the plane, which is a extremely new experience for what we're used to. But it was clear from the second that we got into the airport in New York that Alistair was still fully attached to us. He had no intention of parting ways. He was just sticking by us, asking irrelevant questions, not picking up any social cues, just attached to us. And me and Ebro are just trying to navigate the airport, trying to figure out our transportation to the hotel. And we obviously couldn't talk about what happened yet because this kid's still just following us like a baby duck. And he's just talking and then intently listening to every word that we're saying. So we had to just act like we were trying to figure out our hotel situation. And he just kept trying to cut us off, telling us to come with him, and that he would just have his driver take us wherever we needed to go. And I swear to you, at this point, we were borderline acting like we didn't hear what he said. He was the type of person that gives you a solution every single time you say no. So you have no excuse but to say yes. We'd say, "Hey, we need to wait for our bags. You don't need to wait up for us." And he'd say, "I have nowhere to be." We'd say, "Hey, we're just really hungry and we want to stop at the hotel to shower before we go get dinner." And he'd say, "I'll wait for you to shower. Me and my driver will wait. That's no problem. And then I'll take you to the best restaurant in Brooklyn." We'd say, "Hey, we need to meet up with Doug's cousin tonight. We aren't free." And he'd say, "He could come with us to dinner. We could pick him up. I'd love to meet him." It was just this endless cycle of Alistair not understanding that it was super intrusive for him to plant himself into our plans, and to think that he could just change our plans at his will with a swipe of his card. So once we got our bags and I had our hotel address in my Uber app, and I'm just ready to book a driver, so I give Ebro the eyes. "I got this tuned up right here. Go along with what I'm about to do." So I book the Uber and we stay near the exit door. And we acted as if we weren't ready to leave the airport yet, because we wanted traffic to die down a little bit. And once our Uber driver pulled up right out front and I could see his car through the glass doors, I just said, damn, I could really use a croissant. And I said that because I knew that there was a croissant place right around the corner from where we were standing. I was hoping that Alistair would offer to get me one, and naturally he did. I don't feel good about this, by the way. This makes me upset. I really felt bad that he had to rely on buying stuff for people to keep people around him, but I didn't know how else to handle this situation. I was 21 and emotionally immature. The only thing that my little pea brain knew is that I didn't want to be around this kid anymore. And this was the best solution that I could think of. So Alistair's walking up, about to turn the corner, and then Ebro adds to the order. And he just goes, yo, can you get me an espresso too? Right before Alistair turns the corner. So I look at Ebro and I'm like, why would you add that to the order? Like, I thought we were on the same page. I thought you knew what I was planning to do. So I look at him after Alistair turns around and goes around the corner, and I'm like, why'd you do that? We're leaving. And Ebro goes, yeah, bro. He's going to turn the corner, pick up a croissant, tap his Apple Pay, and be back here in 10 seconds. At least they have to make an espresso fresh, and he won't be back here for 3 minutes. Fair play, he was right. And the second Alistair turns that corner, we slip out that front door as quickly and quietly as possible. And we basically sprint to our Uber that was already there waiting. And we threw our belongings in the truck, and we slammed it before we jumped into the back seat. And we just start saying, go, 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 go to the driver. We thought it was going to be this epic getaway, and he was going to peel off right away. But the driver was a very assertive and aggressive Arab man. And he put us in our place right away and shouted at us to sit in our seats and buckle our seatbelts, and that he'll pull off when he's ready to leave. So we just sit back. This guy was not our getaway driver. He did not care at all about what we were saying. He was an Uber driver, and this is his livelihood, and he's not crashing his car for a couple idiots like us. Just because we were too emotionally immature to tell Alistair that it was time to part ways and we had to sneak away. So he just slowly put his car into drive and started pulling off. I wish he had pulled off faster, because what I saw next made me feel horrible for what we had just done. Alistair came storming out of the doors that we came out of, and he had a croissant in one hand and a coffee cup in the other, and he was visibly upset. His face was bright red and his mouth was in like a full frown. I had never seen somebody frown like that before. It was almost cartoon-like. With how animated it was just such a frown. He looked devastated in a way that felt reminiscent of somebody who had felt that kind of pain before. And I knew right then that this was not the first time this happened. I knew because he wouldn't run out the door like that looking for us. Any normal person would just walk around kind of calmly looking for us. It was like once we were out of his sight, he absolutely panicked, and he was just reliving tons of other people ditching him in the exact same way. But as guilty as I felt, what he did once he saw us in the window of that car made me not regret ditching him. His head was like whipping around trying to spot us in every car, and when he finally caught us, he let out a tantrum-like scream. It was a scream that a young, spoiled, rotten kid would let out at your local Target. It wasn't just loud and annoying. It was grotesque because you could hear the chords of spoiled privilege in it. He'd been doing that scream his whole life when he didn't get what he wanted, and it made me slightly resent him, to be honest. I felt bad at first, but the scream matched with throwing the croissant at the car and shaking the hot espresso all over himself, just in a blind, weird rage. It was just gross to me, and that's me being completely honest. I could sit here and pretend to only be having pity for him, but I'd be lying. Men that act like that gross me out. The expression of sadness that was on his face when he initially came out those doors was immediately overshadowed with rage, and it changed once he saw that we were leaving for sure. So it made me think that that frown that he initially came out with was for pure manipulative purposes. And that tantrum that he did after, once he saw that we were leaving, was who he really was. And me and Ebro both could not take our eyes off his tantrum as we drove away. And once he was out of sight, we could hear his screams a couple more times until they finally faded. And we just looked at each other, blown away by that experience. Guys, I know you love the story, but you'll love the lives just as much. The community is amazing on there. I just want everybody to be a part of the giveaways that we're doing. I want to give back to the community that's giving so much to me. So please, I want to see you on Monday, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a live. Appreciate you guys. Back to the show. I start the first private conversation me and Ebro have been able to have since this kid had latched on to us. And I just say, dude, first class sucks. We both let out a pretty good laugh, but as we start composing ourselves, Ebro says, for real though, that kid was a freak. He got into my phone when I was in the bathroom. I look at him so confused, signaling to him to give me the rest of this story, keep talking. So he just continues and he says, so I went to the bathroom to take a number 2, so I took my Nintendo Switch with me to play a solo game while I was in there. I took the Switch instead of taking my phone because my phone's on airplane mode. You had already fallen asleep and I needed a break from that kid, so I stayed in there for like 10 minutes. And when I came back out, I was trying to be quiet because you looked like you were sleeping, so I was trying to be considerate. And he must have not heard me coming because as I started walking back, I peeked around the corner and I see this little weasel all in my phone. And I stayed in that hallway looking at him, peeking at him over the corner to make sure that that actually was my phone. And I wanted to see exactly what he was doing. Obviously, I couldn't see the screen because I was looking at the back of the phone, but I wanted to see his expressions and like what he was doing with it. So I cut him off really quick because I'm trying to get to the point and I'm just like, bro, did you confront him? And then Ebro goes, yeah, I did. But that kid's so weird. It's like he didn't even understand that I was confronting him about something serious. He looked a little bit startled when I snatched it out of his hand really fast, but he just explained himself saying that I was just putting my contact into your phone. And then he said he was taking a selfie for the icon picture. And right away a light bulb goes off in my head, so I tell Ebro to unlock his phone for me. He immediately does and he just hands it over to me. So I look up Alistair in his contacts. He put a really bizarre selfie as his picture and a bunch of weird emojis after his name. But I wasn't looking for that. I knew he was being weird and made a weird contact page. But I was looking for what was at the bottom. I scrolled all the way down and in bright red font, it said, stop sharing your location. And I turned the phone around to Ebro and I go, bro, look. And Ebro grabs his phone back from me. He's like, no way he did that. And immediately he just clicks the stop sharing option and right away it works. It just immediately stops sharing his location with this freak. I'm almost speechless at this point, but I managed to say, how did he even get in your phone in the first place? Did you leave it unlocked in front of him? And Ebro goes, no, I locked it and I put it in my backpack before I went to the bathroom. So I ask him, you're telling me that Alistair watched you unlock your phone, memorized the password, went into your backpack, unlocked it himself, and shared your information with himself? And then he deleted the message thread between you two that would alert you that your location was shared with him? And Ebro goes, dude, that is not even the worst part. He asked me to hurt somebody for him. And to give you some context, Ebro is an incredibly skilled grappler and an all-around gifted combat sports athlete. He's the nicest dude in the world, but he's extremely capable of defending himself. That's the best way to put it. So I just asked him to give me a little bit more information. Like, what do you mean he asked you to hurt somebody for him? And Ebro takes a big sigh and then he says, I mentioned to this kid that we train. And then he asked me if I was capable of beating people up. And I jokingly just replied, yes, probably people that don't train. Yes, I could probably beat them up. And once I told him, he just wouldn't drop it. And he just kept asking me questions about how he could beat people up. And I just told him to sign up at a gym and start working out, but he just wouldn't let it go. It got to the point where I actually said, it sounds like you have somebody in mind that you want to hurt. I said it as a joke to try to get him to stop talking about it. But he replied, I do, and he was dead serious. I almost butt in to ask him another question, but Ebro holds his hand up to me as if he has not even gotten to the good part yet. And then Ebro just continues to what he was saying, and he says that this kid started to whisper, and he leaned in and he said, I'll give you $10,000 if you do it for me. Then Ebro says, I literally laughed in this kid's face. And I just replied to him, what do you mean? Beat this kid up for you? And I swear to you, he replied, name your price, anything you want, I want this guy dead. And he was completely serious. He was really offering me money to hurt someone. At this point, I'm absolutely dumbfounded about what Ebro's saying to me. This has got to be the oddest person that we've ever met. And who does this kid think we are? Just like a couple poor kids that would be wannabe hitmen for 10K? This is what I mean about how out of touch he was. Like, just because we aren't wealthy, we would just go take somebody out for him? Like, what are we to this kid? A couple of dumb henchmen? I managed to sneak in a couple words and I say, please tell me that he told you what this guy did to him. And then Ebro gets a little bit more serious and he says, this is the reason I called this kid a freak. And I jokingly reply right away, I'm like, it wasn't him stealing your passcode and tracking your location? And Ebro goes, no. It was realizing that he's a perv. This reply came so far out of left field. I was not expecting him to say that. But Ebro keeps going and says that Alistair said that the guy that he wants Ebro to hurt had planted photos and videos onto Alistair's computer. He said that this guy had planted illegal content of children onto his computer and was blackmailing him for money. And if he didn't pay him, he would turn him into the police. And right away, I come to the same conclusion that Ebro did in that moment. And I just go, or those photos and videos were not planted. This guy just found out that Alistair had them. And Ebro goes, Exactly. That is exactly what I thought right when he said it. He just got caught. And he's trying to make it seem like he's the victim and cover it up. I thought this kid was just weird at first, but now it makes sense. There's something super wrong with him. And right as those words came out of Ebro's mouth, his phone pinged. And then it pinged again. Then again and again and again. And Ebro turns his phone around, turns on his front notification screen, and there's 13 messages from Alistair. And they're just flooding in from 13 to 24 in like 20 seconds. And we just sit there staring at this notifications of messages piling up for almost a minute. It gets to 67 unread messages before we finally open it. And I'm telling you, this kid is so much crazier than we thought. We scrolled all the way up to the top of the messages and we saw that the first notification was, "You stopped sharing your location with Alistair." So Alistair must have gotten notified that Ebro had stopped sharing his location with him and lost it because he just started spewing venom all over this text thread. Just paragraphs of nonsense and insults and threats. And sprinkled in little random "I'm a victim" lines. These were writings of a crazy person, and he typed exactly how he talked, almost exclusively in questions without a breath in between his sentences. We had dodged a bullet by ditching him at the airport. He was clearly mentally unstable. It was so odd watching him talk to himself in the text thread, because as we continue to not answer him, it's like he goes in circles of emotion. I'm not sure if he was trying different things in different angles to try to get a response out of us, or if he was actually feeling all of those emotions at once. And what I mean is that he would type something like, "You guys are horrible friends. If I ever see you, I expect an apology from you lowlives." And then the next text would be, "I've never had so much fun before, and all I want to do is spend the weekend with you guys. I'll make it the best week and I'll pay for everything, I promise." And then it would just switch up to straight insults. Something like, "You guys are both disgusting, last row on the plane, last row at the fights, horrible excuses for men, you're not even men, poor boy princesses." And then he'd switch to straight up begging, "I miss you guys so much. Please tell me where you are so I can make things right. Please just give me one more chance. You guys are the best friends that I've ever had and I can't lose you over this." And then it would just repeat again. The cycle would start again from angry and dismissive to friendly and inviting to venomous and insulting to pleading and parasitic. It's not like this kid was manipulative, because you have to be good at manipulating to be manipulative. It was almost like he was passing through cycles of manipulative behavior at such a rate that it made it non-effective. Most manipulators will cycle through angles like this in conversation, and they'll just see which angle that they take gets the best response out of you. Well, at least the best response out of you that fits the agenda that they're trying to accomplish. And then they'll just like pivot to a different angle if one isn't working. But Alistair was just throwing the whole kitchen sink at us right from the jump, as if he had no control over his constantly spiraling thoughts. Obviously, we weren't responding to any of these messages, and we weren't leaving read receipts on, so he couldn't see that we were reading. But we didn't feel like blocking him was the right move, at least until we were out of the city. It was better to keep tabs on him while we were here, just in case of a potential random run-in. He knew that we were going to the fights, so there might have been a chance that he would try to bump into us there. But there were so many people there that it wasn't likely that he would be able to find us. Either way, the point is we let him continue to text Ebro's phone so we could monitor his behavior. We were still in the car on the way to the hotel, but we eventually got tired of reading Alistair's crazy boy texts. So we just put his thread on silent. We put the phone away. The hotel that we stayed at was a Hilton. I know that we said we were broke, and the Hilton clearly is expensive. The only reason we were able to stay there is because my parents pooled together their credit card points to chip in for our hotel stay as a birthday gift to me. So we were super excited to get there. This hotel was way out of our budget. This was about to be the nicest hotel that either of us have ever stayed in. And the angry Uber driver had finally settled down. He was rather friendly to us as we pulled up the hotel. And we walk up to the desk, and the desk lady was on the phone for a little minute before she was able to finally serve us. And I had our hotel itinerary already ready for her, so she just immediately looked it up in the system and she just said, "Oh, perfect. We just got your stay ready for you. We think you're gonna love it." I figured she meant they just like finished cleaning our room from when the last people checked out, because I don't know what else they would need to do for our standard hotel room. So we just went along with it, and we went through the check-in process and we got our keys and everything. Then she gave us an extra fob, and she said that this thing unlocks your floor on the elevator so nobody else could access your floor. I just figured that that was a regular security measure that upscale hotels take, so I just nodded my head and we headed towards the elevator. Let me tell you, this hotel was beautiful. The lobby was amazing, the restaurant looked great, everything was just beautiful and extravagant, and I was so happy that we got to stay there. And when we got to the elevator, we checked our room keys and we were on the top floor of the hotel. I think it was the 6th or the 8th floor, I forget. So we just scanned the fob that she gave us, and then we just clicked the button up to our floor. And the excitement started to ramp up a little bit for us again, and the weird interaction that we had started to fade. We just wanted to get settled in our hotel and get clean, then head to the press conference and feel the energy of the event. We finally get off the elevator and we're a little bit taken aback by what we're seeing. There's just a small lobby area and just 2 doors. I was expecting the classic long hotel hallway with all of the matching doors, but this was so different. It was like our own private lobby and just 2 doors. And we look at both the doors and one of them has our room number on. So we just scan our little key and we just pop the door open. And we realized right away that the front desk made a mistake. This was most definitely not our room. There's no way it could be our room. Not because there were other people in there or any strangers' belongings laying around, but because this room was enormous. This room was like if the master suite ate the master suite. It was the definition of luxury. I literally didn't even know hotel rooms could be this big. It was like a 3-bedroom luxury apartment with a living room, kitchen, and balcony. And me and Ebro are walking around this place like we're breaking and entering, just tiptoeing around trying to not knock something over and be too loud. It literally felt like a place that we were not supposed to be in. So me and Ebro finally look at each other and I'm like, yo, do we correct them? And Ebro goes, what they don't know won't hurt them. So we laugh a little bit, but then we start talking about the possibilities of what would happen if they find out about this mistake. And we came to the conclusion that the worst case possible is that they just relocate us to the small room that we booked. They won't be able to charge us more for their mistake. We'll just play stupid if they come up to talk to us. We might as well enjoy it while we can, just chill in this massive 3-bedroom luxury apartment on the top of this Hilton hotel looking over the Brooklyn Bridge. It was amazing. We figured that somebody else would probably book this room this weekend, but maybe we could get a night or 2 in here before we get kicked out. So we decided to stay and not say a word about it to any employee. And there were 2 bathrooms in this suite, so we got to both go to separate showers at the same time and shower the gross airplane off of us. The plan was to shower, change, grab some food, and then head over to the press conference. So that's exactly what we did. We enjoyed our private luxury showers, threw on some fresh outfits, then walked about 20 minutes to Barclays Center. And we just grabbed a couple Shake Shack burgers from right across the street from the arena and headed in. And the press conference was so fun. The place was packed and the whole thing had a big fight feel to it again. And we just kept Ebro's phone on Do Not Disturb the entire night. We just started embracing the trip. We were over the whole Alistair situation and we were in NYC for a big fight and we were embracing the fun. I'm not going to go into more details about the press conference because I know you guys don't care. It was fun and we were even more excited for the fight after it. And once it wrapped up, our plan was to head back to the hotel and invite my cousin over. The original plan was to meet him at a restaurant near the hotel, but this room that we got was better than any restaurant in the area, so we just said come to the hotel. We were just going to order some room service and chill in this suite the rest of the night and let my cousin invite some of his friends over if he wants to for a little kickback. It took us about 30 minutes on the way back because we grabbed a little slice of pizza, but we eventually arrived back at the Hilton. We damn near snuck in the front door to the elevator because we had such imposter syndrome about having this hotel room. And it really felt like it could be taken away from us at any second. So if they didn't know that we were here, it was out of sight, out of mind. We get back to the room safely and then I just checked my phone really quick. And my cousin said that he was only like 5 minutes away. So we got the TV going and then I started looking over the restaurant's menu. So I'm just looking through this menu, but then I just take a peek at Ebro and he's looking at his phone intently, just shaking his head. So I go, is that kid still messaging you? And he looks over at me, he goes, bro, come look at this. And he proceeds to show me a wave of texts like nothing I've ever seen. Since we put that phone on Do Not Disturb, he hasn't stopped. This entire time that we were showering, then out at the press conference and having fun, he'd been texting. It started with just words and text, but then he started implementing videos and pictures and voice memos. And that's where it actually started getting really disturbing. See, the voice memos were just ramblings that he would do in person, but he would do a voice memo in a completely monotone, regular voice, and then right after, he would send a video or a picture of himself sobbing his eyes out. And then under it, it would say something like, please answer me in all caps, followed by another video of him sobbing and crying, and then followed by another voice memo that sounded like he was completely stable, just chatting and asking questions again. I swear to you, he had not stopped for more than 2 minutes since we ditched him. This was insane behavior, and we both agreed that if we see him again, we either run immediately or we jump him immediately, and then just try to file a police report on him for stalking or something. And remember, we came to those conclusions because we were 21 and dumb. Every 21-year-old would only see 2 options. Can I outrun him? Or can we beat him up? Neither of us thought to get a mental health professional involved. The only thing our puny brains could come up with was, I run away or I punch in face. when it comes to solving this issue. And we even started joking about potential scenarios that we would do if he walked up on us, just making up hilarious sequences about the one-liner that we would say before whooping him. My line was, "Unhand me," before unloading an uppercut that I loaded up like Donkey Kong. And Ebro's line was, "Flee from my presence," before Spartan kicking him in the chest. And as Ebro's showing me the example of his Spartan kick, I hear the door unlock. So it must have been my cousin that was just on his way. The front desk must have let him up, so I just shout in that general direction, "Mikey, you're not gonna believe how we got this room." But I don't hear him respond initially, so I think maybe it's room service. And us yelling over to them made them close the door and go clean another room instead. So naturally, I go over to the hallway to go check our door. And when I turn the corner, my heart sinks to my stomach and I immediately feel nauseous. Alistair is standing in front of the hotel door with his entire body pressed up against the wall to the right of the door. It was as if he was attempting to sneak around. You know how kids will pretend to be spies by pressing their back against the wall and like sliding around and then just shuffling along the whole wall until they could turn a corner? That's what he was doing, and he had this weird, satisfied smile on his face. And the worst part was that he was like chuckling to himself. And it seemed like he was amused that I caught him. And I could tell that he was getting a gross amusement out of the terror that he must have seen on my face. And when I tell you that all of the tough guy scenarios that me and Ebro were just acting out completely fled from my mind, I mean it. And not because he was super scary, but because the idea of touching him, even touching him, was gross to think about. I don't know why, but that's the way I felt. His enjoyment of intrusiveness and his willingness to send grown men videos of him crying all day disgusted me. And not to mention what Ebro said about his blackmailing situation. He clearly had a thing for vulnerable people and situations that made them uncomfortable. You know, that's what really was bothering me. I wasn't scared of his presence around us. It was the fact that the expression on his face looked so satisfied in a non-consensual way, if you know what I'm saying. He was getting his rocks off to me catching him is what I'm actually saying. And it grossed me out to my core. I'm just standing here staring at this little freak. And the only thing that I could say is, "Ebro, come here right now." And Ebro's walking over thinking that he's about to meet my cousin that I had been hyping up to him. But then Ebro reacts the same way that I do. He's just standing there right next to me, shoulder to shoulder, at Alistair silently. And at that moment, I realized that all of my assumptions were right. And it confirmed to me that this whole thing was for his pleasure. Once we were both looking at him, he started rubbing his back on the wall like he was a bear rubbing its back on a tree trunk. And this kid literally moaned. A loud, satisfied moan. How did this kid even know where we were? How did he even get in here? And how dangerous is this kid really? We could tell that he was a little bit weird, maybe a little freak, but breaking into our hotel room and then moaning the second that he got caught is a completely different level. And me and Ebro are just standing there, neither of us knew what to do. What do you even say in that situation? Should we actually jump him right now? It seems like a good option. Part of me really wanted to, but with a stick or a club so he didn't get the satisfaction of us touching him. Neither of us could get a word out before he opened his eyes after his last moan. And it was like watching the mood swing that we were witnessing over text happen in real time. And he started screaming as loud as he did outside of the airport, and he started saying, "Don't look at me like that. Don't look at me like I'm some kind of freak. You guys are the freaks. Poor little dumb freaks." Followed by incoherent loud sobs and screams, and it sounded like he was mumbling something like, "Hold me, please hold me." But I couldn't be sure that that's what he was saying because of all of the crying involved. And at this point, he collapsed to his hands and knees and was crawling towards us, just scream crying as he was crawling and reaching out towards us as if he wanted an embrace. And then he would intermediately collapse to his stomach and gator roll onto his back before squeezing his fists together, just white knuckling and screaming at the top of his lungs red-faced insults at us. And we both just backpedaled away from him and just watched him roll around and crawl. And when he would go from his back to crawling, he would be like pulling at his clothing. And he just started pulling it off as he was working himself up. And he even began hitting himself during the screaming insults. So within 3 minutes of us catching him, he has shown us every emotion in the rainbow and he's just shuffling through them. And he had lost all of his clothes other than his socks during this process. This man was having a complete mental breakdown right in front of us. And we had no idea what to do. It was all happening so fast. And then in the middle of one of his scream fits, I hear the hotel door unlock again. But this time I hear a familiar voice when the door opens. It's my cousin Mikey. The front desk let him in. So I look towards the door and then I look back at Alistair. And by the time my eyes get back to Alistair, he's off of the crawling position. He's back on his feet, only with his socks on. He stood up immediately once he heard somebody else came in the room and is emotions were completely wiped off his face, and he was just expressionless looking towards the door. And right as I'm about to start warning Mikey about what he's walking into, Alistair screams over me, and he just screams, "Get out of my room, all of you." Mikey had just made it far enough into the room to spot me looking back at him while this kid is screaming his lungs out butt naked. But by this time, Alistair had made his way deep into the room, so he wasn't blocking the doorway anymore. Like, we could get out. So me and Ebro had a clear shot to the exit. And luckily, we didn't fully unpack our backpacks, so we quickly rounded up as much of our stuff as we could. And we just shoved it into our bags and headed towards the doorway and got into the hallway with Mikey. I felt so bad because my cousin was so confused. He had no idea what he was walking into, so I had some real explaining to do. We all stopped for a couple more seconds just to take in what Alistair was doing. This kid was psychosis personified. I had never been around somebody so crazy in my life. And we just watch him fall back down into the crying stage of his madness. And he just starts crawling towards us again with no clothes in sight. And we all had enough, and we closed the door on him and we run into the elevator. And once the elevator door was closed, my cousin just goes, "What did I just walk into? Who was that guy?" But me and Ebro had questions to ask each other before we had the bandwidth to fill in my cousin. And we just kind of talk over my cousin and ask each other the same question, which was, how did he know where we were and how did he get into our room? Neither of us could come up with a good conclusion until my cousin butt in and said, "If it was your room, then why did he scream that it was his?" And my cousin was right. That was the last thing that Alistair yelled at us. And right at that moment, it clicked for me. Us getting that room was not luck. He must have called ahead and upgraded us from our basic room to that suite and acted as if like he was surprising us with that upgrade. And they didn't question upgrading us or giving him a room key because he paid for that super expensive upgrade. So I expressed that realization to the other guys, and then I could see it in Ebro's face that he had a realization as well. And he goes, when he had my phone, he must have checked my email or our Expedia booking details while he had my phone while I was in the bathroom. And then finally my cousin butt in again, demanding answers as we started walking through the lobby. And he just goes, "Can someone please tell me who the naked man in your hotel room was, or I'm gonna explode?" And since me and Ebro were back on the same page with how he managed to track us there, we were able to backtrack the story for my cousin. We told him pretty much exactly what I have just told you so far. And my cousin developed this incredibly concerned look on his face. Me and Ebro were properly freaked out, but my cousin was not happy with what we just told him. He basically commanded us to follow him the second we got out of the hotel. So we exit the front doors, now we're on the sidewalk, and my cousin just takes off running, so we follow him. And he took us through a bunch of Brooklyn shortcuts that you could only get through on foot. I can only assume he did that because he was trying to avoid being followed by car. And eventually we end up at some random apartment building and my cousin brings us into it. And naturally, it happened to be his apartment that I just had never been to. And we all just get in there and we just spend a couple minutes catching our breath because we literally ran there. And then finally my cousin sits us down as if he had something very serious to talk to us about. And he said, "I'm not sure why you guys are acting like this is a funny game of cat and mouse. That man that was in your hotel room was not well. He tracked your itinerary and followed you to your hotel. Not to mention, he used his money to isolate you in places that he could have access to you. Now let me see the text messages that he's been sending you." My cousin was almost 30 at the time, so his perspective on this situation was much more mature than us talking about Donkey Kong punching him and Spartan kicking him. And in hindsight, he was right. We were not taking this as seriously as we should have. But I think it's because of how feeble and awkward Alistair was at first. There's just something non-threatening about it. But what he did in that hotel room was a different level of crazy. And my cousin reaches over to grab Ebro's phone from him, and Ebro tells my cousin Mikey that he hadn't checked it since we left. So there might be some new stuff in this text message thread that we haven't seen yet. I started watching Mikey scroll these threads, and I watched his concern raised to a completely different level. I was assuming that he just saw the sheer volume of texts or the videos of Alistair crying into the phone. But I was not expecting what he was about to show me. And he turned the phone towards us and we watched a video of Alistair dancing around in a zip-up hoodie that I had left there, and a pair of Ebro's dirty boxers that he left on the bathroom floor after he showered there. He just propped the phone up onto something and was just dancing slowly in front of the phone, as if he was slow dancing with the both of us. And I start to try to talk again, but Mikey says, "Hold up, it's not over yet, keep watching." And a couple seconds later, Alistair comes up really close to where the phone was propped up, which by the angle and the height of it seemed like it was one of the dining table chairs. And he whispered into the phone, "You were sitting here, weren't you?" And then he proceeded to take a deep sniff of the chair before the video abruptly ended. And before we could even say anything or give our initial reactions to that weird video, Mikey just frustratedly said, "I wish you guys knew his last name so I could find more information on him." And Ebro goes, "I know his last name, you just didn't ask me yet. His last name's Aldridge. Alistair Aldridge, the most rich boy name that I've ever heard." I only remembered because it sounds like Elder Ring, the video game. Aldridge, Elder Ring, you hear the similarities? It didn't really matter how he remembered the name, it mattered that he did remember it. So Mikey immediately whipped out his laptop and started doing a deep dive on this kid, just trying to find anything that he possibly could about this guy. There was nothing at first. There was no criminal record anywhere, no social media accounts, no pictures on Google Images. We honestly couldn't find this guy anywhere, which kind of made sense because he said that his family was the type of extreme wealth that regular people don't know about, so it would make sense that he was very careful with his digital footprint. So I would imagine that that level of secrecy would carry over into how they interact with the internet. And then Ebro says something genius. He just goes, "Put the word Reddit at the end of whatever Google search that you're doing. The Aldridge family, Reddit." Everybody knows that if you're just trying to find some dirt on somebody, all you have to do is go dig through the Reddit and 4chan threads. And the first two search bars that came up on Google were just about how the family collected so much wealth. And apparently they were in the steel business and the luxury hospitality business. And it was kind of weird because the articles and the threads never referred to an individual in the family. It was always just the Aldridge family. Like, they know that they can't hide their famous name, but all hyper wealthy individuals could hide inside of the family name. Reading about how much money that Alistair probably had access to made him much more intimidating. This family's wealth dates back to the first settlers in America. This family was literally gifted estates by Great Britain before the Revolutionary War. This money was as old money gets in America. We backed out of those links and scrolled further down on the Google search page until something finally caught our eye. And we saw a Reddit thread that said, "Aldridge family is hiding a hound. Follow the hush money." And that little search, "follow the hush money," seemed pretty promising to us. I'm not sure what hiding a dog has to do with anything, but it was worth a try. And the thread was just one long entry that didn't seem to get any engagement or upvotes or anything like that. It wasn't a popular post by any means. It looked more like a journal entry of a guy talking to himself, just a wall of text. First, it kind of seemed just like another whack job spewing conspiracy theories on Reddit, just hating a wealthy family, until about the third paragraph. I just saw in this wall of texts, he hounds his targets relentlessly. He stalks and obsesses because he knows that you don't have the resources to fight back. This seemed a little too on the nose to not be about what we were currently experiencing. So we just kept scrolling and reading. And the man that wrote this thread was explaining his experience with a man from the Aldridge family. And his experience was almost identical to what we were currently experiencing. I didn't really put it together that we were being legitimately stalked. I thought he was just a weird kid. But whoever was on the other end of this thread had went through this for months. He was right. This was a case of criminal harassment and stalking. So we just keep reading through this thread, and this man had uncovered multiple other victims of the Aldridge family. But all of the other victims had accepted hush money to not follow through with any of the charges. And apparently, Alistair had been doing this for a while, and he got his repetitions in and learned what he can and cannot do that would get the police involved. He had gotten better at this over time. He literally became a serial stalker. And I knew for sure that whoever was writing this thread wrote it about Alistair. All of the little minute details were just too similar. It had to be about him. Then we got to the last paragraph, and we realized who this really was. The last few sentences of this thread basically explain how this man was able to access Alistair's computer. And he gathered proof that Alistair was more than a stalker. He got proof that he had very, very illegal videos and photos stored on his computer. Alistair was a perv. This man who wrote this thread was the man that Alistair had asked Ebro to hurt for him. This was the man that Alistair was scared of. Naturally, first question is, why hadn't this guy went to the police yet? Why isn't Alistair arrested for this yet? And we all looked at each other after we finished this thread, and we just kind of nodded in agreement. We all knew that this had to have been about Alistair, and we did the only thing that made sense in that moment. We just replied to the thread something very simple. He's stalking me now. Please help. We clicked send and we just sat there for about 10 seconds. And it was almost like whoever wrote that thread had push notifications enabled for replies. We got a direct message from this guy almost immediately that read, "If he's currently after you, we need to meet. Please tell me you're in NYC." Thank God this guy was in New York too. So we just reply, "We're in Brooklyn. We can meet at the Barclays Center in the morning." And he just quickly replied, "Meet at 11 a.m. I'll be in a red hoodie." We sat there silently for a moment, and then Ebro broke the silence by saying, "What if this is Alistair?" And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit worried as well. I wouldn't put it past him to set a trap like this. He's definitely crazy enough to write a thread like that about himself, just to see if any of his victims are reaching out for help. I could only imagine the satisfaction that he'd have on his face if it really was him. And we showed up looking for help, only to find him wearing the dirty clothes that we left in the hotel room. But we had no choice but to just show up and give it a try. And before we got to sleep at Mikey's house, we checked the messages from Alistair one more time. And he still hadn't stopped. This kid was terrifying at this point. He was sending videos of himself with his phone propped up while he was laying in a luxurious bubble bath with Ebro's boxers over his head, just sniffing the crotch really hard. And then in between his sniffs, he would start crying his eyes out, screaming about how the boxers are starting to lose their scent, followed by waves of text just telling us that he's gonna find us wherever we try to hide. And just saying things like, we're his little poor boys. And he's just texting us, talking about us like he owns us. It was disgusting. I wanted so desperately for the man tomorrow to be real and for it to not be another trap. At this point, I wanted Alistair arrested. But luckily, me, Ebro, and Mikey were all experiencing this together. I could not imagine having to go through this alone. So we finally got to fall asleep, and we woke up about 30 minutes before we had to be at the Barclays Center. But it was only a 10-minute walk from Mikey, so we were good on time. I was also happy because the weigh-ins for the fight that we were supposed to be there for were at the same time that we were meeting this guy right outside of the venue. So hopefully we could come up with a plan with this guy that also includes us enjoying the fights that we're here for. And naturally, right when we wake up, we're scrolling the social media just to make sure that all of the main event fighters made weight, so they're going to compete. And we just wanted to make sure that the event was still on, something crazy didn't happen. But wouldn't you know it, Max Holloway was pulled from the card due to a poor weight cut from the New York State Athletic Commission. Apparently he got way too dehydrated to make the 155-pound limit, and his body gave out on him, so he was ruled not able to compete. So not only do we have a hyper-rich serial stalker criminally harassing us, the main event fell apart again, so that pretty much meant that we were here for no reason. We probably wouldn't have even went to the Barclays Center that day because the main event fell apart unless we were meeting that guy from Reddit. Because the main event was most likely off, who cares? And like I said at the beginning, it was hard to find somebody to fight Khabib on 6 days notice. Imagine how hard it would be on 1 day's notice. But either way, we had to get up and head out. And like I said, it was only about a 10-minute walk to the Barclays Center. But it was still super lively around there even after the bad news broke. There were thousands of fight fans hanging out in front of the arena, and all throughout the surrounding bars and restaurants, which meant it was pretty tough to find somebody who was anonymous. And the only identifiers were 11 a.m. and red hoodie. So we shot him a DM that we had arrived, and then we started looking around for Alistair just in case it was a trap. And we just stood on the corner and we were all just looking in opposite directions, almost with our backs to each other, just to make sure that nobody could sneak up on us. And we received a DM back that he was actually in a green hoodie. And once he said green hoodie, I look right in front of me and there's this dude looking right back at me in a green hoodie. He was 5 feet away from us. And I really only realized once I started looking for green. And he walked up to us in a serious but friendly manner and just introduced himself to us. I'm sorry for lying about my appearance. I just had to make sure that you weren't with Alistair or you weren't Alistair. It wouldn't be the first time he sent somebody for me. And Mikey answered him by saying, "How do you know that we're not with him?" And this guy replied, "You would have known what I looked like. You wouldn't have looked straight through me while I was 5 feet away from you just because I wasn't wearing red. You all looked at me 10 times and I could tell that none of you had any idea who I was." And we all kind of nod our heads with how slick that line of thinking is, before I follow up and say, "How do we know that you're not with Alistair?" And this man just replies, "You don't, but I'll tell you what, if he shows up right now and he sees me, I bet you that he isn't happy to see us together, because that kid knows I'm coming for him." And then he introduces himself as Marty. And Marty was actually pretty cool. He was just a pleasant guy, very easy to talk to. He didn't feel like a Reddit conspiracy type. It genuinely seemed like he was a victim of this freak and he had no idea how else to handle it. And he went on to explain to us that Alistair had approached him at an airport as well. And he offered to upgrade Marty's seat to first class the same way that he latched onto us. He told us his story with Alistair, and it was borderline identical to ours by the tactics that Alistair would use. And Marty said that he also didn't feel threatened by him, so he kind of let Alistair intrude on his life. And he went on to explain how things started to escalate and how attached Alistair got to him. It got to the point where Alistair started showing up at Marty's jobs and purposely causing issues, but he would never let the public see how crazy he is. Marty was a waiter at an upscale restaurant, and Alistair would come in multiple times a week, and he would just make small complaints about Marty's service or just send things back to the kitchen frequently. And he even gave himself an EpiPen in this fake illusion that he was having an allergy attack. And then after the allergy attack, he said that Marty recommended a dish that had peanut oil in it even after Alistair told him that he had a peanut allergy. But Alistair didn't say that he had an allergy. And also, in reality, he didn't have an allergy. It was all a show to get Marty in trouble. He would just consistently make scenarios that made Marty look bad until he finally got fired. And he would even show up to dates that Marty was on and act like he was Marty's secret lover that he was hiding from his girlfriend. He basically did anything that he could to isolate Marty from everybody that was around him. Then after he successfully isolated Marty from everybody else in his life, he would start calling ahead places and paying for him, or upgrading experiences, or depositing some money into his bank account. And then he would show up wherever Marty was, acting like he was his sugar daddy and his only source of money. Marty said that his theory about Alistair is that he's so lonely, but he's so out of touch with reality that he isn't capable of making real friends, so he has to buy them. He just thinks Alistair doesn't want people to leave him, so he uses all of his resources to force the people that he likes to stay with him the only way he knows how, by swiping a card. At least that's what he thought started Alistair's spiral into his obsession with controlling people, and his need to be able to do whatever he wants to somebody vulnerable. He thinks that's what Alistair's behavior has become at its root. He wants control over something that's helpless, and it's become a fetish of his. And just thinking about that train of thought alone was disgusting, and I felt bad for Marty, because he had to deal with Alistair completely alone for months. I couldn't imagine having to deal with that by myself, so I asked him what we were all thinking. How did you get this kid to leave you alone? And Marty just shows off a huge grin. He just goes, I found his perv stash. And the second that I find out where he is, I'm gonna expose him. He knows that I found it, and he's been constantly traveling, avoiding me since then. I haven't heard from the kid since I've had the leverage. I figured that he fled to a different country, and I figured that if I go to the police without him, the Aldridge family will get word of it and be able to get ahead of it, and they'll do their best, they'll throw money at it to cover it up. So I need to expose him publicly, so there's social pressure to lock him up. Because if nobody knows, they'll be able to let him out without the Aldridge family reputation taking a hit. He's done what he's doing to you guys to hundreds of people, and that's horrible, but I don't blame the rest of them for taking hush money. But if they knew what he had on his laptop and what he paid to watch happen to those kids, I promise you none of them would have taken the hush money. We mentioned to Marty that Alistair had asked Ebro to take Marty out and hurt him for blackmailing him. And Marty just chuckled and just goes, I bet he's not the first person he asked. And I got a message on my phone at the same time. I checked it and it said that there was an update to my will call order. We were set to pick up our ticket stubs the night of the fight, but this notification said that our tickets had been revised. And the thought hits me right then. I whip my phone towards the guys and I just go, yo, it's Alistair. He changed our tickets. And Marty just goes, you guys just got the best seats in the house, and he'll do this wherever you go so he could have access to you. There's no way of keeping him away from you with the kind of money that he has access to. You get dinner, he reserves the table right next to you and buys your meal and watches you eat. You go to the airport, you get upgraded, he's sitting next to you first class. You try to move, he rents the apartment next door. The sheer amount of wealth that he possesses opens every door that you try to close behind you. And I just pile on to what he's saying, and I just say, you try to go see a couple fights, you end up in the VIP section. And Marty goes, exactly. And we're going to end it tomorrow. That's why I'm coming with you guys. Whatever tickets that he just upgraded you to, I'll buy myself as well. And one of my best friends is a police officer and he's working tomorrow's event here. He's aware of this situation, but he told me we need to get the public behind us before we make an arrest. So he'll be there waiting for the right moment. And right as Marty finished his sentence, something weird started happening around us at the Barclays Center. People were yelling and running. There was like some type of commotion in the air, but I couldn't tell what was happening. But people were running towards the Barclays Center. And when I say people, I mean everybody in the area. We're all looking at each other confused. And part of me thinks I'm going to turn around and I'm going to see Alistair charging us, shooting up the place. Because we're here plotting with his arch enemy. But by people's facial expressions around me running past us, I could tell that they're more excited and less scared. So Ebro shouts at somebody running past about Why are you guys running? And the kid shouts back, Conor McGregor's here. He's in the back of the arena. And all of us kind of look at each other. We were having a serious conversation, but we all kind of make a gentleman's agreement that we would also like to see Conor McGregor enter the Barclays Center. We'd love to see him arrive at the venue where his biggest rival is about to fight the next day. Part of me thought Conor had showed up to step up on one day's notice to fight Khabib and save the car. For just a moment, Alistair didn't matter, and we were just excited about the event that we came to see. But that was until we got to the back, like where you enter in the back parking lots of the arena, and we see Conor's car speed off into New York City. And everybody's just kind of standing around confused at what just happened, and then we all start scrolling. People are checking their social media threads, and we see what happened. And apparently Khabib had slapped one of Conor's teammates the night before at the Fighters Hotel. And apparently Conor McGregor decided to get onto a private jet and fly from Ireland to Brooklyn and attack Khabib in the back of the Barclays Center in the parking lot with a dolly. He threw a dolly through the window of a bus to try to get to Khabib, and the dolly hit other fighters instead, the windows crashing glass into their eyes. The night before these athletes were set to compete, I had felt so excited for the event for just about 1 minute, and then I couldn't help but to see the similarities between Alistair and Conor. They had all of the money in the world, and it opened doors for them that wouldn't open for anybody else. They both have access to intrude on people's privacy and hurt them, simply because they had the money to do so. It was an odd realization of how much money influences the world. And after that frenzy, we just kind of spent the day laying low. We parted ways with Marty, and we just planned to enter the arena at different times, so just in case Alistair was there, he wouldn't see that we were together and get all suspicious and not show up. And we planned on just sending Marty pictures of the tickets so he could buy the same ones before we went in. And luckily, the main event with Khabib was still on. They had just found a third fighter to step in on 1 day's notice. His name was Ali Aquinta, and he was a hometown New York guy, so everybody was pretty satisfied with it. We were excited about the event again. Well, not excited, but satisfied, because at least we were going to be able to watch Khabib maul some poor Long Island guy. Al's a great guy, but he's a part-time fighter, part-time real estate agent. Everybody in that arena knew that he was getting mauled. That doesn't matter. We showed up at will call and we got our tickets. And it made me mad seeing the price that was on these upgraded tickets, and just knowing that Alistair was able to just swipe his card and purchase something like this on a whim. They were $5K each, and they had access to floor seats and the VIP area, where there was like a buffet of nice food and where fighters would be walking around as well. These type of tickets are a dream to fans like us. Like, looking at this, it should be the best day of our lives with how much we love that sport. And he was just able to buy this as a tool to stalk us. And it was unfair, and life is unfair sometimes. But we were going to get this guy tonight. So we send Marty the picture of the tickets, and he's not surprised by the price. And he said he maxed out one of his credit cards to get one, but him and his friend were prepared. And luckily, his friend was a cop, and he had already seen the evidence that Marty had on Alistair. We just needed to be able to confirm that it was him, and he'd be able to make the arrest. So me and Ebro went to that arena pretty confidently. We just acted like we were surprised by the random upgrade, and we just walked around enjoying ourselves because there was no telling where Alistair was really lurking. We just waited patiently, and eventually we saw Marty come in with his hood up. He was purposely laying low so Alistair wouldn't see him. He didn't show up for a while, but right as everybody else kind of started showing up for the main event fights, I felt a very familiar grab on the back of my arm and elbow. I aggressively yanked my arm away and I turned around to see that little beady-eyed weasel of a man with that same satisfied look on his face. That same look from when I caught him at the hotel room. And I think he saw on my face that I wasn't scared of him this time. So he changed his angle and he started trying to belittle me because he wanted to feel that control over me again. And he just says, "Are my little poor boys liking the treat that daddy got for them?" Now he was referring to himself as daddy. And I saw Ebro texting from the corner of my eye, so I knew that he just alerted Marty. And Alistair must have noticed that too. And he snapped at Ebro, literally snapped, and then said, "You're on your phone a lot for somebody who doesn't text me back. Do I need to pay your phone bill too for you to respond?" And at that moment, I could see that he loved doing this. He showed up here thinking this was going to be another one of his control fantasies. But me and Ebro were standing there confidently. We knew what he had coming. And I could see on his face that he didn't like how little he was bothering us before Ebro said, "Maybe I'll send some money to your commissary so you could still call me crying from jail." And I saw a flash of fear in his eyes, like he knew that we had something prepared for him here. And at that very same moment, Marty came up blaring an air horn to get everybody's attention in the area. The main event fights hadn't started. We were in the intermission between the prelims and the main events, so everybody was just standing around and talking. So when this air horn started blaring, everybody looked straight towards us, everybody in the VIP area. And when Alistair saw Marty, he let out an actual squeal of fear. He sounded like a ferret trying to escape a cat. He tried to turn around and run, but all of us grabbed him. And Marty started announcing to the crowd like he had a speech prepared about what Alistair had done to all of us and what he found on Alistair's laptop. And he kept this scene going in this performance of humiliating Alistair for about 3 to 5 minutes. He was just explaining to a group of people in the public who Alistair really was, just how he went about stalking people and his family would pay it off, and then about what he found on his computer. He publicly humiliated Alistair, and he had the receipts printed out prepared for everybody to see. And he was handing it out like he was handing out flyers. And he had a cop on standby to arrest him, and everybody in the crowd, just like he had planned, was recording him. So there was public pressure. Watching somebody who thought they were untouchable squirm like that is more satisfying than you could ever imagine. He looked like Peter Pettigrew begging Harry for mercy after Sirius Black and Remus Lupin found out that he was pretending to be Ron Weasley's rat for 10 years. The craziest part to me was that even with all of the funds in the world, he couldn't find any friends or happiness. Me and Ebro would have had the best weekend we'd ever had, flying economy, staying in a small hotel room, and sitting last row at the fights. And this man couldn't buy himself a friend or a good time. It really makes you put things in perspective. But VIP floor seats with your best friend at a UFC event was not too shabby. Thanks, Alistair. Hey, YouTube thinks that you would like this story next, and YouTube knows you pretty well. I don't think they would point you in the wrong direction. So this is the one video that YouTube thinks that you would like that's similar to this one if you also enjoyed this one, or maybe it's a little bit different, but they think you'd like it, so click on it.